Creating the basic line graph that you're going to be using in the demographic transition model assignment is relatively easy. There are two ways to proceed. The simplest way is to use the two data sets that I've given you. I've given you a set of data that shows historic birth rates from the World Bank for all the countries in the world from 1960 to 2020, as well as a separate one that gives you historic death rates. You are simply going to cut and paste the birth rates and the death rates and the years into a new spreadsheet if you want to go the simple route. The other thing that you can do is look at historic data, and I've given you a couple of citations in the assignment, but it will require you to go to the library, the reference section, look up a few historic demographic data there, and create your own spreadsheet using your own years. But you'll be able to produce something that's a little bit nicer because you'll be able to go back and really use this old data and show transitions that are going to really be important, especially for many of the Western world countries. It's your choice how you decide to proceed. But once you have this data, you'll simply click on the row that you want and copy that. You'll also have to click, of course, on the country name and year row as well and copy that, and do the same thing for the death rates as well. And that will allow you to cut and paste them and just do a little bit of change so that you're able to have something that looks like this: the crude birth rate, the crude death rate, and then the years in the columns. The next thing you do to create the line graph is really simple. You just highlight these three rows and you go to Insert and you go to Recommended Charts. And the first thing that comes up, at least for me, is the line chart. And you can just click on that right now, and it will create that line chart for you and place it down here. You can make a few modifications here if you want to by going to the little chart filter, or you can re-click on the chart and you can go to the plus minus for the chart elements and take off what you want or don't want to have. I am going to actually take off the chart title here because I'm going to put the chart title in the infographic itself. But I'll allow you to decide what you want to put in here or what you don't want to. When you do have it, make sure you select it all, as I've done right here, and then go to File, again go to Home, and then say Copy. And that's going to copy that whole chart, and you will then be able to paste this into Illustrator. Okay, now it's time to take the graph that you created in Excel and put it into Illustrator. But first, let's just talk a little bit about Illustrator. Illustrator is a vector graphics editing software that allows us to make lots of interesting pictures and make graphics and eventually make maps with it as well. When you first look at it, it can be a little bit intimidating, especially because I have all of the map publisher tools loaded in here as well. But let's talk about some basic things. On the left-hand side of my screen are all the various tools that can be used for drawing lines, making boxes, and things like that. You can undock this and move it around if you want to, as I have done with the layer windows over here. So these are the layer windows, and if I want to, I can dock them in and actually add them to the active window I'm using, but I like to keep mine separate. The ones that I come back to time and time again are the layers windows and the property window. And if you want to turn any window on, you can actually just go to Windows right here, and you can see that layers is selected here, as well as properties is actually not selected here, I think because I'm not on it right now, but you can open and shut these things as you need to, and you'll get used to that. The layers are really important because they allow us to see where all of our graphics are and whether they are on top or below of something else. So they'll become really important. And the properties are really important because the properties are going to tell us how big elements are, what color they are, or that sort of thing. For the time being, I'm just going to move that to the side. I've created here what's called an artboard. You can create pretty much any size of artboard you want to. I usually start with just the common one that's created. I haven't titled it anything yet. I just sort of opened this thing up. And you can actually modify the size of that artboard if you want to by clicking over here on the artboard tool. And you can shrink this or make it bigger, move things around. And you'll probably want to do that, especially when you're making maps. I'm going to unclick that right now. And I have actually copied the Excel chart already. So I'm just going to go to File right now and say Paste so that I am able to paste that object here. I guess under Edit, I'll be doing Paste, excuse me, not File. So I pasted it. So there is that object right now. And so now if I bring that layer window back here, you can see layer 1 has something. And if I open that layer up, there are all sorts of groupings of various lines and texts and all sorts of different things here. It can be a little bit hard to modify something like an Excel chart using Illustrator because there are so many complex things, but you'll see how we can do at least a little bit of basic editing to them later on. The important thing that we're going to be doing here now, though, is not worrying so much about what the chart looks like, but what the elements are around the chart. So if you want to select that chart again, you can just use the selection tool over here and draw a rectangle around it, and it will select the whole thing, and then we can move it wherever we want to move it, which is sort of a handy thing to be able to do. But before I do any of that, I want to show you a little bit about that principle of layering. And so I'm actually going to add another layer, but I'm going to make sure that it's behind this right now. So let me bring that window back right here, and you'll see that that layer number 1 is there. And I'm actually going to change the name of that layer to DTM chart, just so I always remember what that is. And then I'm going to lock that layer so that I can't mess it up in any way, which I am prone to do. And now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to create a new layer. Now it's placed that layer on top of that, and I actually want it below it. So I'm going to highlight it and I'm just going to drag it below the demographic transition layer. And now I will be actively working on that layer, especially I know since this one is locked. So let me move this to the side. What I want to do now is I want to create a box that is going to go behind all of this so I can color it so it's not just bright white. So I'm going to click on the rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle that's larger than the artboard that's behind this. And now that rectangle is there. I'm going to use the hand tool right here to drag this back so I can actually see it. So now there's a big white rectangle here, and you can see that big white rectangle is here in the layer, but I'd like that to be a different color. And so I'm going to click on the properties over here and I'm going to change the fill, which is what the color is behind it, to something else. And I'm just going to make it sort of a light gray color so that we can see it appear. So now you can see that light gray color appears here behind the chart itself. Now, I think that chart should probably be bigger than it is, so I'll go back to the layers and I'll unlock that chart. And I'm actually going to lock that layer up and click on the DTM so it's the active layer. And now I can use that selection tool again and draw around that and make that bigger. And then I can make it larger, and you can do this in Illustrator by clicking on the corners here, but you could end up with some strange proportions. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the object right here and transform it, and I'm going to scale it. And right now it's at 100%. I'm going to make it 175% and see what it looks like. And there, it's a nice bigger chart, something more that I want. Okay, now I can unclick that, and I'm going to go back to the layers, and I'm going to click on it again. So now it's locked. So now we can add other elements that we want to here. And the next element that we might want to add would be a title, for example. So let's just put some text on this generally, and I'm going to add another layer, and I am going to let this one be on the top, and I'm going to change that layer 2 to the background. I'm going to just call it background so I remember what it is. And then I'm going to change layer 3 up here to text. And I'm going to click on that. Now I can add text layers as I want to in here and do different things with them if I want to. I'm just going to go with basic stuff right now, and I'm going to add a text layer that is going to be the title.
So to create text, I'm going to click on the type tool over here, and I'm going to place it right here. And you'll see it's really teeny tiny. I'm actually going to use the zoom tool to zoom into that a little bit more so I can see it. And I know that I've got it highlighted and active because if I drag my layer box here, you'll see it's highlighted and has this little blue marker or green marker showing me that. It might be another color. I'm going to click on that text tool and I'm going to highlight that text. And I'm going to call it Aruba's demographic transition. I think I started correctly too. And then I'm going to, oops, I don't want to do that. I just created some new text that I don't want here. In fact, I'll show you what I did. I accidentally clicked on the text layer back there and I created this little type that I don't want. So I'm going to highlight that and then actually just delete that so that I have just Aruba's demographic transition here. And now I am going to go back here and I'm going to highlight the whole thing. If I can get it to highlight the whole thing, there we go. And drag this back and go back to properties. And then when I'm on properties, I can change things like the font size and I can change the font characteristics of it and do all sorts of different things here. And I'm just going to make it a relatively big font, 36 points. I'm going to keep it Myriad Pro. See, it looks like the only thing I can do here is regular Myriad Pro, so it doesn't matter. I'm just going to move this over here so I can see it. But before I do that, I'm going to lock it again so I can see what it looks like. I'm going to now use that tool to zoom out. I'm going to click on the zoom tool and go over here, and you'll see a plus would make it bigger. But if I press Alt, oops, it won't let me do it for some reason. Maybe I should just lock that text again. If I forget, there we go. If I press the Alt button, I should be able to zoom out in this way. And it's still actually pretty small. I probably want to make that bigger eventually. But for the time being, I'm just going to keep it like this. Off screen, I'm unlocking it so that I can click on it and move it. And so I'm going to move it to a position where I want it directly above the chart, right here. Now I can change the color of it, I can change its font, I can do all sorts of different things to it. I'm now going to add some other elements here, and I can add some other text. To do this, what I might want to do first, though, is lock this text so it doesn't add it to this one, and instead I can create a new line of text right here on layer 4, and I can drag that layer in here so that I could have something else here. So right now I've got this thing that says Aruba's demographic transition, but I can call this title, and I can change this layer 4, and I can call it something like the source. And then I can go ahead and lock this other one, and with that highlighted, I can go and add another text box to it down here. So here's where I might add the source. And just like that. And then I can add other text as needed using the same process. I'm not going to do that all right now. Instead, I'm just going to lock these layers up and make them smaller. We can also add graphic items as well. So let me do that.
Before I do it, I should add another layer though. So I'm going to add another layer up here and I'm going to add another element. And I'm going to call this one a map because I've downloaded a little map of Aruba that I want to put on here just as a little bit of context. Again, we're making this an infographic with some text elements and some line elements and things like that. I'm just sort of showing you how you go through the process. I'm obviously not doing the same thing. So now I have this highlighted here. And what I want to do to put this little JPEG that I've downloaded from online is I want to say File and then Place. And then it's going to bring up my desktop here. And let me just minimize this a little bit so I can see it better. And I believe that this thing is called AW01. So I say AW01 and I say place it. And it says, it gives me a little warning. It's going to get rid of the metadata, but I don't care. I'm just going to say OK to that. And then it gives me this little map that I've created and allows me to place it someplace. So I'm just going to click it right here, and it's a little too big. So I'm going to scale this down, and I want to scale it down to, I'm going to say to 30% of its size. So again, I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and Scale, and it automatically makes it 175 as the default, but instead I'm going to say 30% and say OK. And then, oops. I've created some text there that I didn't want again. Not sure how I did that one, but you can see it shows up on that same layer as the map. And so I'm just going to go to that layer and I'm going to delete it right there. And then I'm going to go down here and hit the selection. And now I can move that map of Aruba to where I want it to be. So in addition to having something like a map and to having some basic a title and a source, you also need to have some interpretation of what it is that we're seeing here. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to call this good. It's been long enough, just so that you have a sense of how to use Illustrator and to move things around. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or to create some more videos if you want them.